I think I'm unmuted. Hope so.
Yes, we can hear you fine, thank you.
That's very good. Excellent. So, Nick, are you unmuted and ready to rock?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, that's
all good.
Okay.
So Sally's got our slides. Hello, everyone. So we're from CamSight, me and Jerry. I'm the community fundraiser, and Jerry is the assistive technology lead. We're going to talk to you today about accessible content, more in the perception of kind of people who are pretty much totally blind, some high-level partially sighted people, but we're really mainly focusing on people that use screen reading software. There are other softwares out there, such as other bits and bobs for more partially sighted people, but they still may dip into screen reading software. So we'll start with that anyway. So if you go to the first slide, please, Sally. And like I just said, the first thing is with people who are obviously blind or partially sighted, there's lots of different programs you can use. Me and Jerry I use JAWS, which is Job Access with Speech. And this basically reads the screen to me from top to bottom. It is quite expensive, it's around £1,000, and they release a new version every year, which you can upgrade. But luckily I get access to work and they pay for that for me every 3 years. There is also MVDA, which I know Jerry's using, as you may hear, and that is free, and that's on Windows, and that is a free downloadable program. We also both use an iPhone, and on everyone's iPhone, if you go into settings and then into accessibility, there's lots of different options for different accessible features. So we use something called VoiceOver, and it's really good. Basically, once again, reads the screen top to left, left to right, and you can swipe around, and it has an invisible rotor that gets you to different features as well really quickly, and that's really handy. And it's really, well, I found it easy to use, but it is something that is widely available. For example, my girlfriend has an iPhone, so I can use her phone. I can turn it off and on really easily if she gets a phone call and she's not there. So that's really handy as well. So there are other programs available for partially sighted people, such as this thing called Zoom Text, and a few other bits and bobs. But yeah, we can hear your MVDA quite well, Jerry. Yeah, so yeah, and there are a few other bits and bobs that partially sighted people can use, but we're not really going to focus on them today. When we use a screen reading software such as JAWS or MVDA, what we do is we move around the screen either using arrow keys or tab to get around, but we also can use other keys to jump around quicker. And for us, sometimes, like anything, if you like to skim read or get to the point you want to get to, we use things like H, and we can jump between the headings to get to the bit of content that we actually want to get to. You can use other keys to get to lists and to tables, so like T for table, etc. So you can jump to them quite quickly and easily. And that's quite handy for us, like I say, because you don't want to just scroll through everything. Sometimes you just want to get to the bit you want to get to. And so sometimes if you're looking to put headings in to things, do that, and then we can jump to it quicker. And also when we're jumping to links, sometimes you have embedded links, and they're really handy, and we can jump to them links. But the one thing that isn't handy is when you have a link that says click here, that doesn't really mean much to us because all it says is click here. So it's having that content in the embedded link. So when we jump to it and it says, I don't know, CamSight website, then we know where we're going once we click on that, and then we will click on that and go through to the CamSight website. Click here means nothing. So I think we're going to the next slide, please, Sally, and Jerry will take over.
Okay, this is information really about programs that can be used with screen readers. So we would use standard programs like Microsoft Word, Excel, varying web browsers of choice, including Firefox, Edge, Chrome, all the usual things that people use. And Sometimes you need to change settings within those programs to actually make them functional with screen readers. We use them again with keyboard commands. So quite often we'll press a control key, for example, in combination with a letter key to perform a certain action. And the screen reader will read the information from the menus and ribbons. And then if you've got, for example, a Word document, we can move through the Word document using arrow keys and up and down arrow keys, left and right arrow keys. And they do certain things like read a line of text, read a word or a character. These are all important stuff when you're actually composing a document. And so we get to be pretty good at composing documents, I think, with the screen reader. Proofreading can be interesting, difficult. There are varying settings in screen readers. So sometimes you want it to read every single piece of information, punctuation, spacing, all that kind of stuff. And other times you just want it to read all the way through a paragraph of text, for example, and without reading every full stop, every exclamation mark, every comma out to you. So you can change the setting to make it so it makes sense really to you and you're not listening to extraneous information. They're pretty good, the screen readers, at intonation as well. So although they have these very robotic voices, which you probably heard mine talking a little bit earlier on there, they do have good sort of intonation, so you can tell pretty much when you're at the end of a sentence when it's reading. There's a bit of a learning curve for people, I think, in terms of listening to synthetic speech, but you do get very used to it. And one of the things that Nick and I probably get asked a lot when we're showing people is, can you slow your speech down because we can't understand a word it's saying? Because we tend to speed it up in order that we can kind of cut down on how long it takes to do things, because it is slower than looking. But when you get skilled at it, you can pretty much get to be at the speed of someone looking at the screen. And I think the next stuff is about documents and what's usable and what isn't. And I can't remember, Nick, can you remind me whether that's a next slide or whether it's still the same?
It should be the slide you're on, I believe.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, okay. So hopefully there's a bit of blurb about documents going up. Okay, so different formats of document have varying success rates as whether screen readers can read them or not. The big nuisance, in fact, is the PDF file, portable document format. It can be, you can make accessible PDF files which contain text, but quite regularly a PDF file is created by taking a photograph of a text document, a printed document. If that happens, they're very difficult to access with the screen reader because it identifies the whole piece of text as a photograph. So you'll open a PDF file and the only information that you will get is, this is an image. And it's very frustrating. In some of the screen readers, there is the facility to carry out optical character recognition, OCR, on a PDF file or a photograph file. And that can be helpful, but OCR is not deadly accurate. So it's not something you can entirely rely on. I think that's, I'm just stopping the chat there. PowerPoint is something that's sort of usable. You can sort of move through slides, but if stuff is image related, it just makes it harder to understand, harder for the screen reader to read. So there's the stuff that then you start to say becomes inaccessible. Some things are accessible but not very usable because it takes so many keystrokes and operations to actually get information from them. And I would say that PowerPoint can be a bit like that. It's quite a difficult program to use. So we might say it's accessible, but not very usable. Just checking my notes a bit here. So you may hear my screen reader reading out to us.
I think you could go to the next slide, Sally.
Yeah,
I
I think it is next slide time.
Yeah.
Thank you. On the next slide.
Cannot be read by screen readers and are viewed as an image/graphic of the same.
I think one thing Jerry didn't mention as well is on Microsoft Word and Publisher and things like that, there was a file path that you can go to an accessibility checker. It's okay. It's not completely great, but it's something you can look at before you put these or send out the document. You could just, it checks the document for you and it might just pull up a few things and review it for you. So that's one option. But back to you, Jerry.
There is now an easy way to get to the accessibility checker, which is pressing function key 6 rather than clicking on the menus, which may be helpful to some. So basically that it just scans through the document you've composed and comes up with errors, if you've made any. It thinks you've made them and gives you a little bit of information on how to correct them. Okay.
Use clear headings when using Word or PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm just reading through the notes there. Use clear headings.
Use descript bullet. Lists work well. Use
Yeah,
bullet points or
lists work well and bullet points. The screen readers identify this and give you some. Nick was speaking earlier about the quick keys, so we can move to a list, for example, by depending on which screen reader you're using. There's a quick key in all of them. I think for NVDA, the quick key is I to jump from list to list. These work good on web pages. So if you've created a web page that's got lists and headings on it, it's likely to be more accessible to a screen reader than if you don't do that. Tables are interesting. Tables involve a bit of memory for screen reader users. So if you've got a number of columns that you are reading in a table, the columns will have or should have headers, so they're identifying what is going to appear in the column. The screen readers can read these, but again, it takes quite a lot of keyboard commands and movement to actually make sense of them. And if you've got a table that's got, I don't know, 5 columns in it, you have to remember what the header for each column is, which can be quite annoying. You get 10 rows down in a table, and you want to know what the header for column 5 is because you've forgotten it. So you have to go back and check it again. There is some ability to configure a screen reader to have a keyboard command to read the header of the column, but it's not straightforward. So tabular information can present difficulties.
Font size should ideally
Okay, so we're talking about font size. It is quite a lot of choice really there in terms of what's acceptable. Depends quite a lot on people's level of vision. both Nick and I don't have any, so we've chosen not to talk too much about fonts. Okay.
And the next one's about color contrast as well, but once again, we just put that in there, but it's not really relevant to us, so we're not really going to talk about that much either. And then should I go on to the pictures?
Go on to pictures, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, please, Sally. So when you're putting together documents, you may put pictures in them. It's really handy to have the alt text in there, or captions, they may say as well. Actually, Word have started doing it. They actually do automatic alt text and captions at the moment. They're not always the best. It just comes up with, you know, whatever it fancies. But it's really good to go in there and just kind of put the description, which helps us quite a lot. So I've got an image on here, which is of my lovely dog, and then I'm there next to her. And as you can see, it's just the description that we've put in there. Is literally just Nick and Amber outside, and that doesn't really give you much, you know, to go off if you can't see it. I mean, who's Nick, who's Amber to begin with? They're two people, we don't know. So if we go to the next slide. So like I said, using alt text and captions on photos. You don't, and when you're describing the image, you don't need to say image, this image contains or anything, because when the screen reader goes down, it says image 1, and then it goes to, if there's another photo, it'll go image 2. So it will put that'll say that to us automatically. You don't have to say that. All you need to do is just describe the photo. So there's lots of different things you could put in your description. So you just kind of make it relevant to your organization, and things like that. You could, well, yeah, so there's anything. You could look at facial expressions and describe that. You could say race/sex, you could say age, you could say what clothing they're wearing, you could say what the weather's like, you could say what the nature's around them like. There's lots of different things. You know, you could go on forever, but just make it relevant. Don't go too much, but just say enough in a way. And it kind of comes to you after a while when you've been doing it a bit. So if you go to slide 7 now, Sally, the same picture should be there.
Yeah, it is.
And we've then put on there Nick and Amber with a full description. So that may be, I think there's a description on there. It's not on my notes, which isn't handy. But I think
it is on there, it's fine.
Yeah.
Pardon?
There is a description on there, Nick.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of just saying, you know, we're in the foreground, and then in the background there's certain things as well. And we've, you know, we could go on further and say more and more, but that's what we've just put down. So you can put more, you can put less, but just try and describe as much as you can. And then next slide, please, Sally, is about social media, and Jerry's going to run through that. He will be using his screen reading software for a few bits and bobs, so you can listen to what emojis sound like for us, and what some hashtags and things like that sound like to us as well. So take it away, Jerry.
Okay, so social media is used quite a lot by people who use screen readers. Twitter, Facebook, they have auto image description facilities. So if you post a photograph on Facebook, it will attempt for a screen reader to provide a description of it. Sometimes they are very accurate, sometimes they are hilarious, and most of the time they are relatively informative. With Twitter, you can, of course, if you are sending tweets, if you are tweeting, and you're tweeting images or links to images, you can include the alt text. So you could describe what the image is you're sending. It will depend on what you're using to tweet as to where you find that setting to switch it on and allow you to input that information. As I was saying, people do use Facebook. They use it for all kinds of stuff, the same sorts of things that that everyone else used. We post photographs ourselves, even though we don't see them, but friends of ours obviously can, and so that would be something we do, obviously, for work, for our CamSight Facebook and social media feeds. We do have images that are on there and attempt to alt text them accurately and concisely. Yeah, okay. One of the strange things about screen readers is their pronunciation. And I think we're going to go on to, I think it's the next slide, which is Camel Case.
This slide, Jerry, has the smiley faces on.
All right, actually, yeah, this is the emojis. Yeah, how emojis sound. And I'm going to try and find these images and let you hear how this sounds. They are different to photograph emojis. So the screen reader treats them slightly differently and identifies them and reads the description that's been given to them.
You can include facial on it.
I'm just getting to the area so I can let you hear what these sound like.
Active image of Nick and
So I'm just scrolling through. You can probably hear my my machine chatting away.
Twitter. Emojis are okay as they are. On it. Don't over emoji on it.
Yeah. So if you include a lot of emoji in your messages and stuff, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Hashtags and camel case. Slide 9.
I'm just
As you will see in a minute.
Hashtags
emojis.
Oh, here.
Don't over emoji on it.
When I find these images.
Emojis are okay as they are described,
Going down.
but
Yeah,
they are not
yeah.
for on it.
We're
Don't
not
over
doing-
on it. Hashtags and slide 9. Emoji example. Slide 10.
Right,
Emoji
slide 9.
examples. Slide 10. Emoji examples. Long descriptions.
Okay, here we go. I think.
Smiling face. Slightly smiling face.
So if you send us a smiley face, the screen reader will quite often just call it a slightly smiley face. And we have to sort of work out, what does that mean? Are you smiling, or are you just being miserable, or what? A lot of these kind of make sense visually, but when you hear them read out, don't make very much sense. So
Happy cat face.
happy cat face, who knows?
Smiling face with sunglasses.
That's a bit easier to work out. The smiling face with sunglasses.
Poodle.
Poodle. Presumably it is a poodle and not something.
Smiling face with halo. Kissing face with smiling eyes. Grinning face. House with yard. Red angry face.
Okay, so that is an example of a string of emoji, how much sense that does or doesn't make. Some of it is related to when people became visually impaired and their age and stuff like that. So, for example, I lost my sight when I was about 5 years old, way before any emojis were available, and I never really used a computer until I was in my 20s. Okay, Nick will be slightly different from me. He's a bit younger than me, apparently, and so his understanding, and Nick was a lot older than me when he lost his vision. His understanding of what visual symbols mean is a lot more developed than mine is. People can tell me this stuff, but you've got to remember it, of course, and that's quite hard. So I tend personally not to use emoji because I'm not always sure as to what I'm going to convey if I send a particular symbol. So that can be related to a person's experience rather than whether or not the screen reader's accessible and reading them stuff.
Slide 11.
Okay.
Next slide, Sally, please.
Next slide's got a couple more emojis on. Would you like
Okay,
to
go to the
move
next
on?
one. Yeah, please.
Camel casing word.
Okay. So I think we're on to the camel casing now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So camel case, what is it? Why is it important? Okay. So this is how something sounds when a screen reader reads it, and how that can be changed by capitalization of words. So when we come across hashtag information, hashtags, the screen reader will read it out. But if, and we've got these examples here, let me try and get it to read it sensibly.
Camel case with script. Hashtag I stand with NH staff.
So I think I stand with NHS staff. Okay. The first example, I think, is showing it spelt without capitalization in certain areas. And the screen reader reads it in this very odd fashion.
Hashtag I stand with NH staff.
Okay. So when the correct camel casing is used, so capitals at the beginning of words, etc., it reads it a little bit better.
Hashtag I stand with NHS staff.
I stand with NHS staff. So the next one.
Hashtag Blackliversmatter.
If anyone could understand that, that's a fair play. That's that initially was the Black Lives Matter was presented in that fashion. So
hashtag Blackliversmatter.
Not very understandable. I hadn't got a clue what it was saying first time I heard it. So, okay, so let me move on to how it sounds with camel case correct.
Hashtag Black Lives Matter.
A bit better.
Hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Okay, and then
hashtag kindness train.
Okay, kindness train. As I said, kindness train, which again doesn't mean anything.
Hashtag kindness train.
But when you change the case,
hashtag kindness train,
it reads it much better.
Hashtag camsicle.
Camsicle.
Hashtag camcycle.
Camcycle. A lot better. So this is something just to be aware of if you're using hashtags and how it will sound to the user of a screen reader, and how irritating or confusing that can be. You can get the screen reader and go and spell out each individual letter, but if you've got a string of hashtag, that can be very time consuming. So yeah, we advise using camel case where you can, where you remember. Get into the habit of that idea.
Hashtag kids to adults.
Kids to adults. Kids adults, or whatever it said there.
Hashtag kids to adults.
A little bit better.
Slide 12.
Okay, so that's camel case.
So if you go to the next slide, Sally.
Yeah.
And I'll just talk about videos and podcasts, really. Videos more to begin with. So at CamSight, whenever we try and put the videos together, we always try and put the audio description on top. And Jerry's normally the man for the job when we need voiceover. And that's put together quite easily through a free program. And we'll just add that on top of any videos that we do. Obviously, that helps with people that can't see at all. Just once again, just describing what you can really. That just takes a bit of practice and getting used to. And it's normally, sometimes you try and talk when the video hasn't got any speech, so you may be describing the person or the scenery around them. Once again, like the pictures really. And then also transcripts are really helpful. I kind of gave an example when I gave this talk before, is I'm quite into my football, say, and I want to listen to, maybe I managed to talk about their team for the weekend and stuff, but I'm not interested in the whole talk. I just want to get to the point about which players may be playing or who's injured or whatever. So I don't want to listen to the whole video. So I may just go to the transcript and then just jump through it a lot quicker. And yeah, so that's what I would try and do, is jump to the bit that actually interests me instead of sitting through the whole video. I can do that. It's not always the easiest on a computer using a screen reader to jump through and fast forward and stop and things like that. So transcripts are really handy for that if you're short on time and you just want to get to what you want to get to. And same for podcasts as well. And then just going on to the next slide, just saying about how if you make your content more accessible, obviously you then widen your audience and open it up to more people to be able to use it. And that's all really it. And then the last slide is just about a few useful links that we're pointing you towards. Government websites about accessibility. And a few other bits there. So we'll leave it there and pass on to the next speaker.
Thank you very much. That was really, really great.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Jerry. Can people hear me? I dropped out then, so I'm back, I hope now.